Callaway paid a $20 million fine for doing that to the Attorney General. So that was a nice little thing she could wave around and say, wow, this is, we're doing justice for the people. But Dr. Kishore, they figured they were going to get him now. And in 2009, in December, the Attorney General, an investigator for the Attorney General, with the Attorney General's explicit orders, went to David Perry's sober house and set up a sting. One-way mirror, recordings, 3 dummy employees kind of lingering around, and the investigator was there too. So they were gonna see if he would offer a bribe. So Dr. Kishore and several of his top people went over there to talk with him about setting up a sober house in Mr. Perry's, setting up a primary care practice in Mr. Perry's sober house. The problem is he wouldn't bribe them. It just foiled their whole plan. It was terrible. So they left without what they wanted. That, of course, would have resulted in a much earlier raid on his house. So, but that didn't work. So what did they do next? Well, they sent in the Department of Revenue. They sent in the Drug Enforcement Administration. That didn't work because he didn't use narcotics. He didn't prescribe narcotics to cure narcotics. So they didn't have any narcotics to get him on. So the Attorney General sent in their crack Medicaid fraud division. They spent 13 months going over everything and found nothing. The Office of Inspector General went there. So as you can see, this isn't random, all right? When they want you, they get you. So in 2009, because nothing else worked, they then decided to convene a grand jury. The grand jury meandered around for 2 years. And in the interim, they used some other really shady tactics involving a bunch of lawyers. Isn't that surprising? The first lawyer that was involved with this is a guy named Sorrell. Now, you maybe don't know that name. He appeared in the news in hundreds of articles, and you may not have noticed his name. But a lot of us have heard of the New England Compounding Center. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He's the lawyer. He's the lawyer that got him to back off in about the mid-2000s before they'd killed all these people. He said, no, we're safe, everything's fine, don't worry, nothing to see here. And then that's when that's when everything happened. So Sorrell, some have called him a fixer. Right? He's the kind of a guy that you hire to do it, like a sort of a James Carville kind of a guy, a fixer. All right, so Sorrell deals with this, like these medical types of practices, and that's his specialty. So Sorrell wanted to get a monitoring contract that would allow his firm in the high rent district in Boston to get about $1.25 million a year to monitor the evil Dr. Kishore to make sure that he complied. So behind the scenes, this was all contrived, and Sorrell delivered the message. Dr. Kishore said, no, thank you. Now, this is the way it's done, by the way, folks. This is the way it's done. The government, the business, they ally, the money's there, and everybody makes plenty of money. All right, that didn't work. So he hired a lawyer, another very connected lawyer, from Libyan Hoops, a big white-collar defense firm. The Attorney General met with his lawyer and delivered another message. You got to give up your law license and your practice, and everything will go fine with you. He again refused. He hired another lawyer. This guy was even more connected. His name is Stern, former U.S. attorney. Some of you may know who he is. He delivered the same message. Dr. Kishore again said no. So when you refuse an offer you can't refuse, they don't take no for an answer sometimes. And after that, they sort of put the horse head in his bed. And as the movie goes. So that's, and then the takedown that we talked about at the very beginning resulted. Dr. Kishore, after, in this 2011 time frame, in September of 2011, after they arrested him, the day after they arrested him, they came back with 32 indictments for Medicaid fraud. And then after 2 more years, now get this, a grand jury for 4 years is looking at this. They came back with 44 more indictments in the year 2013, a separate case. And what they were saying is that he was bribing these sober houses to get their business. Now, the interesting thing about this, a lot of you, almost all of us, have gone into a convenience store and we'll see a Dunkin' Donuts in there. We'll see a Subway in there. That's called co-location. You ever go to the airport, you're going to see all these various franchises there. Co-locations. They rent space from the airport. Dr. Kishore used that same tactic. He did a co-location. He rented space in the sober house for his medical practice. And he had a lawyer, paid him to do a contract. He paid them rent every month, all of these various sober houses. And the Attorney General, interestingly enough, admitted to the court, I've been able to see this paper, well, it doesn't look like a scheme, but it's a scheme. I mean, they literally admit it, that it's a scheme on paper only. But we know he was a bad guy. So they really have, they've said, it looks bad, so we're going to take him out because, well, we never really do know the because yet. We'll find out. He has a trial scheduled for April on these first 32 indictments. Now, that's somewhat fearsome, and this has been going on now for 4 years. Can you imagine having this hang over your head for 4 years? Actually, for 6, in a way, because it started in 2009. And the other 44, it's unclear exactly what's going to be happening there. I had an opportunity to attend a couple of these hearings and watch what was happening. The Attorney General has 3 people there prosecuting this guy. And so they really want him. They want him bad. And he has a very large Boston law firm that's going to be assisting him at the trial. And we'll find out what happens. But thank goodness we have juries. That's all I can say. Now, there's a few lessons that I think have come home to me as I put this material together to do an article for the New American Magazine, which I hope you subscribe to. If you don't, it's great. Try to get it if you can. There seems to be a difference between government employees who are what our local columnist Howie Carr would call a hack and a true believer. And you can almost spot the way that they're different. I view Martha Coakley as a hack. She just is somebody that wanted to keep the job and keep the power. Whereas I view Elizabeth Warren as a true believer. I think she believes her Marxist ideas. No, I really do. I think she really believes that Marxism is the way to go, probably more than Marx believed it, you know? And so what you're fighting in a situation like that is not somebody that's ideological, but somebody who just wants a scalp. And now that there's a different Attorney General, we'll see if that same thing happens. I'd also, while I'm thinking of it, would like to recommend to you an author took a great deal of time to write a whole series, up to I think 7 or 8 articles at this point, for Chalcedon Foundation on Dr. Kishore method that he used to treat addiction, and on some of these things in much, much more detail, because it probably comprises over 100 pages at this point if you really have some interest in the whole thing. Chalcedon is named after one of the early conferences of all of the bishops in the world that occurred in the first several hundred years of the Christian church. And Chalcedon is spelled Chalcedon, and it's Chalcedon.org, if I'm not mistaken. And the author is named Martin Selbrede, Selbrede, Martin Selbrede, if anybody would like to check it out more. So, some of the interesting things that really lead you to scratch your head on this. For example, the largest sober house that he's accused of bribing did not get indicted at all. 3 of the tiny little ones he's accused of bribing did. Why? Well, you got to look and see who runs the large one. And once you look and see who runs the large one, then you know. And that's the way it works. So a number of these sort of anomalies are there, and the real takeaway of all this is, what is happening to our politics? What is happening to even a man who went into business to help people? He had a business, and he helped people with his business. I bet a lot of you do the same. Right? A lot of you are in business, and a lot of you help people in your business. And it scares me to think that if you happen to be in a category that the government doesn't like at that point, you may be one that they decide to come after. I can assure you that Dr. Kishore did not think he was in the crosshairs when this started. He didn't think that at all. He was providing a service. He was at the top of his game. He was doing medical work for people that desperately needed it, and Martha Coakley was absolutely not on the radar. I wonder if there's any of the other of us in this room that are on the radar. That's what scares me. I've had the same problem. I was on the radar and didn't know it. I decided to sue the Chief Justice of the Commonwealth. That was not a good career move. Shortly thereafter, for a completely different reason, things came unglued, and I've been without a law license for 1.5 years. Hopefully I'm going to have it back within a month or so. They move very, very slowly. But I think we all have to really consider, particularly our involvement with a group like the John Birch Society, helps us, I think, take the much bigger picture of these sorts of things. It has for me. I never would have understood this sort of things if I hadn't been a regular reader of the New American Magazine to see the underlying political issues that really come up in these sorts of things. So we should always be thinking, all right, is what I'm doing one of those things? Homeschool. Homeschool is one of those things that pulls attention from authorities. Having particular religious beliefs sometimes pulls attention from authorities. Having certain political opinions pulls attention from authorities. Having opinions about taxation can sometimes get the authorities very interested. So we got to just be careful about what we do. And one of the things that I learned from my own experience is never do something that could even ever be construed to be illegal. You always have to fight on the bright side of the road. We got to change things, and we got to change things legitimately by educating people through programs such as this and our neighbors and whatnot. And you can never, if you cross the line purposely or inadvertently, that's going to be not the way to fight it. So I urge us to continue to become more aware of what's really going on behind the scenes in the government. I think Dr. Kishore's lesson is helpful to all of us to see the structure of how government is working with businesses, how government is working against our own interests, And I'd urge all of us to just make sure that we're looking at our own lives and shore up anything that may not be right there. And so that is all I had for today, and I think Dr. Kishore had a few other words too.
Thank you. I call Greg my American voice. And he's done we spent 3 months together cloistered on his farm while he was taking care of the pigs and whatever. In between, we would talk and look at the documents. And he made a great summary of my story. It's a complex story. It's not something that's easy to understand. He made it understandable, readable, and intrigued the public. Great opportunity for me to tell my story and ask you a question. I start with the last slide. I brought in 15 slides, and this is the very last one. Is this American justice? I'm going to have Greg, who's been writing my story, tell most of it, the bulk of it. But it's a fascinating story of my journey into medicine, the business of medicine, and the glass ceiling I hit, and what happened subsequently, how my company was taken down. And here I am to tell the story of how I survived this 4 years of, as Greg calls it, colonoscopy. So it's been a long journey for me to stand here, hold my head up, and tell my story. And the take-home points are, is this American justice? Is this how we should treat an enterprise? How do you treat innovation? How do you promote it, not bring it down? And especially, all of you heard about the OxyContin epidemic, heroin epidemic, overdose deaths. We have a problem in the society. And where does the answers come from? We need medical leadership. We need leadership in many areas of human endeavor. And we have to group together to make it happen. So my story tells you a little bit about a microcosm of what's happening here and now in this state. And it's a fascinating story. I'm going to have Greg start off with his section of the story, and then I'll come back to give you some fill in the gaps.
Good afternoon. My name is Gregory Hession. I have been a lawyer for about 20 years in Massachusetts, suffering currently from a little bit of my own takedown, and I'll tell you about that after a bit. Dr. Kishore has had an experience that not just would make a movie, would probably make 2 movies. We're going to tell you a little bit about it, and I think it'll be worth your while and an interesting finish to the dinner, rather than sometimes a snore that happens with speakers after dinner. You're going to find some sparkling things and some very discouraging ones. Dr. Kishore is to de-addiction medicine as McDonald's is to hamburgers. And he has figured out something he called this Massachusetts model, a way to systematize helping people, a lot of the people that we don't probably in this room see too many of. I'm going to introduce you to the seamy underbelly of what's going on all around us in our cities and towns here. And Dr. Kishore got involved in the drug war. He got involved as a non-combatant. And as with most non-combatants, the Red Cross or whatever, they just try to keep from getting shot while everybody else is having the war. He got taken down as well in the war. And I'm going to tell you how that happened. In September of 2011, Dr. Kishore right here. Now, how many police do you think it would take to take him into custody?
About 4 or 5. Heavily armed.
Well, that's you're way under. 15 police cars, 30 state troopers, and a helicopter. And they all came to get this fierce-looking man here and take him into custody. Why? I'm going to tell you a little bit about this story. This really was there's a couple people behind the scenes that were operating what happened to Dr. Kishore. One is the unlamentedly erstwhile Attorney General Martha Coakley. Now you may remember her, and and the other one is a name which is far less known, a guy named Michael Botticelli. Michael Botticelli was the head of the Massachusetts Bureau of Drug or Substance Abuse. Now, isn't that an interesting name for a Massachusetts bureaucracy? That bureaucracy gets about $75 million a year of our tax money. And here's the problem with government agencies, and this is one that will illustrate the point perfectly. The whole point of these agencies is you can't succeed, or the agency won't have a purpose. So, the purpose of the Bureau of Substance Abuse is to make sure that substance abuse continues unabated. In fact, it would be even better if it would increase, because even more bureaucrats could be employed and the budget will get bigger and bigger. For example, this year it's 8% more than it was last year. And if you've noticed, I don't know if you've been watching this, but the governor and the new attorney general are convening all kinds of blue ribbon commissions and other completely ineffective sorts of blue ribbon commissions and everything to study the drug abuse problem in the Commonwealth. Something happened after Dr. Kishore was taken out of this field, and that is drug usage and abuse shot up like that. If you look at the statistics, it went along, and suddenly he was taken out of the field. And so let me tell you what he did a little bit. Dr. Kishore began working in an addiction program that was literally founded at the time of the founders. Dr. Benjamin Rush, Martha Washington were involved with this. And he began to cut his teeth there and learn about the addiction issues. And he became involved with that and said, that's the niche he's going to pursue. So he did. And as time went on, he had the opportunity to become a director there, and he moved on to other positions where he learned his trade. Over time, he began to develop a systematic approach to dealing with drug abuse, something that nobody had ever done before. Here's how you deal with drug abuse, and it's the same way that most physicians at this point seem to deal with a lot of things. Here, go take a drug. Okay? Here's how you deal with drug abuse. Go to the methadone clinic, go to the Suboxone clinic, get your narcotics there instead of here. Instead of on the corner, we'll addict you to this other narcotic. Now, I don't know if a lot of us haven't had the opportunity maybe to see that world that's around us, that sort of invisible world, but it's not a nice world. And there's a street ecology, you could call it. That's the term that Dr. Kishore uses. And the street ecology consists of runners, of dealers, of money people, of mules, all kinds of people that do the things that need to be done to make sure that the drug economy works. When you pull a person out of that, something happens. Those people don't want their buddy pulled out of it. They pull him back, and they try to pull him back. So in addition to all the psychological and physical forces that keep a person pulled into drug addiction, it's also that street ecology that keeps the hold on that person. So Dr. Kishore knew he had to deal with a much bigger concept than just treating the drug addiction. So the easy way to do this, think about this. If you go get your methadone, there's nothing that says you can't continue to be a drug dealer and continue to take the other drugs too. It's just another high. A lot of people do. And I happen to be talking to a business owner right next to the gigantic methadone clinic in Springfield, near where I live. And the guy says there's needles everywhere. He goes every day he goes out there, and it's just full of all kinds of needles and drug paraphernalia and everything, right next door to the clinic. So obviously the people are not using the methadone only; they're continuing their other addictions. So Dr. Kishore came up with some very important concepts. First of all, when an addict is trying to get rid of an addiction, there's some immediate physical symptoms for the first period of time, and those symptoms have to be dealt with. So he gives non-narcotic medications to help them with the aches, the nausea, the sleeplessness, and all kinds of other things that occur over this first month. Now, once that happens, you also need to do other things like keeping them out of that street ecology. You need to be able to help them with other medical problems. So he views his practice as a primary care practice that focuses on addiction. But think about all the other problems that a person who's drug addicted often would have as medical issues. Sexually transmitted diseases, hepatitis, all kinds of other problems, nutritional problems, and the results of bad nutrition. So all of these things can be treated in a holistic way as a person. Now, here's what Dr. Kishore was able to do. Anybody know what the long-term sobriety rate for Alcoholics Anonymous is? Generally 2 to 5% of 1 year sobriety rate. When Dr. Kishore started, he started at about 37%. When they took him down with the snipers and all those guys, he was up to almost 60% long-term sobriety rate. So clearly he was putting the hurt on the people that profited from the drug dealing business, namely the government. Now, instead of doing that, they should have given him a medal. But I'm going to tell you what happened. You're only through the first movie. Now, wait, the sequel's better. So Mr. Botticelli, the drug czar from Massachusetts, who was just maybe 2 weeks ago coronated as the United States drug czar. So the Peter Principle is always at work. Everybody always gets appointed to their level of incompetence, and in his case, above it. So now he can do to the country what he did to Massachusetts and impose that defective, ineffective methodology of dealing with drugs. Now, it's a tragedy and a shame that people get so pulled into all this. But what happens, particularly these opium-based types of compounds, the reason they work is they slow your body down. They stop everything from going right, like digestion and everything else. So it racks terrible offense on one's body. And a long-term opium type addiction, that is, with Vicodin, OxyContin, heroin, all of these are all these opium-based narcotics. Some are synthetic and some come from poppy plants. You rack up your body. So there's a lot that needed to be done. So Dr. Kishore, not only did he put together this program, but he decided, well, we need to go to the places where these addicts are if we're going to have a primary care practice. So he began to put freestanding practices all over the Commonwealth, and he had maybe 25 or so, and he began to put them in what they call sober houses. Now, a lot of us here might not know what a sober house is. I didn't. A sober house is sort of a halfway house where addicts are trying to get the counseling and treatment they need to get back into society and kick the habit and stay on the straight and narrow. You're not allowed to stay in one if they drug test you and your drug tests show that you've been using. So there's a lot of profit in these sober houses. Sober houses are generally funded in large measure by both government and by rentals of the people that stay there. One of the keys to a sober house is the drug testing, which medically is recommended about 3 times a week. Dr. Kishore, as part of his treatment plan for people, recommended testing 3 times a week as a stick to make sure that they stayed also on the straight and narrow. But a sober house, unless they have a primary care practice located there, can't prescribe drug testing. Well, what was happening in the Commonwealth prior to Martha Coakley doing this is the drug testing people were just simply getting these testings done, and they were illegally charging them to Medicaid or getting falsified doctor signatures on these things. Medicaid will only reimburse a drug test if it's done by a doctor's prescription. So Dr. Kishore got the idea, and it's a sensible one both in terms of a business and, of course, in terms of helping the people. Locate the primary practice in these sober houses. That way, we can do patient intakes, we can find out what the problems are, we can provide the necessary testing and the necessary medical care for these people. And it worked out well, and he had 20-some of those also. So when he was finally taken out, there were over 50 practices around the Commonwealth that were providing medical services for these unfortunate people. His total lifetime, he calculated maybe 250,000 people his practices have treated. Can you imagine that? That's a lot in a small state. And it's only been in Massachusetts. So, you know, a state of 6 million people, that's a large percentage of the population that have seen Dr. Kishore. So here's what happened. When he began to put these things in the sober houses, it started to impinge on the business of some of these other labs. There were many commercial testing labs that didn't operate as primary testing practices. They were just laboratory drug testing businesses, and big ones, some of them nationwide and some of them centered in the Commonwealth. The money that these guys made was pretty phenomenal. And the Boston Globe published a chart that showed that two of the biggest ones were going like this, down, 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 as Dr. Kishore's was going up. Martha Coakley, at the same time, needed a good campaign issue to wave around. And a good thing to do was to, you know, pick on the Medicaid fraud situation. So that came across as we're doing something for the people here. So she began to ally with some of the a little less than savory characters to take down some of these labs. So one fella who they worked with is a guy named David Perry. David Perry is a disbarred lawyer, was a disbarred lawyer. He was disbarred for 10 years, a felon, a drug dealer, and a drug user himself. This is all public information that I read in the newspaper. And he had a sober house himself, a place called Safe Haven. It was in Boston, and it was not sober, and it wasn't safe. And there were so many cops called there so many times that the city council finally convened and took him out. They shut him down because there was so much drug dealing going on there. It became a difficulty for the neighborhood. So all of the sober houses don't always work to be sober. So after that got gone, the two fellows, a guy named David Fromm, who was a partner with Mr. Perry, they each went separate ways, but pretty allied. Fromm went and founded another commercial drug testing lab, and Perry founded another sober house. Now, Fromm decided he was going to take out all of his competition, and he began to sue them. Sue, and there's still a ton of lawsuits out there. I've done a search of the dockets, and I'm finding that the guy sued practically every competitor he's had. And Mr. Perry was used by the Attorney General as a takedown guy. So he actually was sort of the guy that they used for a sting, we could put it that way. He took out Callaway Laboratories, he took out Willow Laboratories, and then it was time to go to Dr. Kishore. Now, it was pretty easy to get those guys because they were bribing people at sober houses to get their business.